This is Zettelcast, brought to you by readers, writers, thinkers, and teachers from LiLLiPub, along with our partners in thought, our Zettelkastens. In this show, we share discoveries that our Zettelkastens have shown us.
There you go.
And compare notes on how we're using this marvelous invention in our creative work. Thank you for joining us.
All right, Brooke.
Do it again.
All right.
Episode 3, Our Plus Ones.
All right, so here we are with another episode of Zettelcast, where we talk about our Zettelkastens, and the Zettelkastens themselves are our plus ones. So to get us started today, I thought that it would be fun if everybody could just give a brief introduction of themselves and an introduction of their Zettelkasten itself. Does it have a name? Has a personality started to emerge? How did you meet? So, Kathleen, would you like to start us off?
Okay. This is my Zettelkasten. His name is Zeke, and Zeke comes from Zeke and Ye Shall Find. And boy, oh boy, does he deliver up some surprises. I love it when I pull a card that I've written some time ago and completely have forgotten about, and it tells me something that's really pertinent to where I am right now today. It's always endlessly surprising. I'm 77 years old. I'm retired. I started my Zettelkasten on a whim. My brother got me going down that path, and I thought, well, I'm going to study linguistics and just have a leisurely life, just doing whatever reading and research I want to do, and just gradually doing a Zettelkasten. Well, my Zettelkasten had other plans for my life and made them clear rather early. And so things are totally different than what I ever imagined. And I think I'm working harder now than when I was employed full time. So that is me and Zeke.
All right, Julianne, you're next on my list, so
Sure. So I'll introduce myself first, and then I'll introduce my Zettelkasten by way of a PowerPoint, because of course. So I'm Julianne Scherer. I am a musician and composer. As a hobbyist, I make my living in software development at an investment bank, and I've been doing that for several decades. And I got involved in the whole Zettelkasten thing because throughout my life I've been pulling together a lot of different threads. They exist. There's one skein of yarn that's at the top of my head, and it goes like this: in music and math and software, I just see these connections. And I've tried several different things, and the Zettelkasten is the latest and greatest, for sure. So I will introduce you to my Zettelkasten, because I don't have it. This is the vision. Nadia Z. So Nadia comes from Nadia Boulanger, who, if you haven't heard of, you might want to look into. Just an amazing woman who is one of the most influential music teachers of all time. In the 20th century, she was the teacher of a lot of very extraordinary composers. And she is known and told by her students, some of whom are still alive, and it's very moving to hear from them, that she had just an amazing library in her mind of music and philosophy and English and French, and she was just vast knowledge, and she could pull it out in the context of teaching somebody. And what her view of teaching was, that it was her job to help a composer find their own voice. So that's my inspiration for my Zettelkasten.
Thank you, Julianne.
Yep.
All right, I'm calling you next, Victoria.
Well, my name's Victoria Crowder. I'm the author of the forthcoming book Zettelkasten for Fiction, where imagination finds order, which is about how to take the Zettelkasten and apply it to writing or reading fiction. Mine developed, I was writing a novel in around 2020 into 2021 that I had originally started back in the mid 90s. I got about 25,000 words in and kind of stalled. And then, like it does, life took its own turns. And I put that little novel on the shelf and didn't think about it for 25 years. How about that for a hiatus? And then I started thinking about it again. And my heart, which has always been a writer, started to kind of disengage from the tech job that I've been doing for the last 13 years. I'm a network architecture engineer. And I thought, I miss writing. That's my heart. And so I pulled that little novel off the shelf and dusted it off and started trying to figure out how to go back into that world, which speaks to our next topic, which is about mining old work. But as I was doing that, I was trying to figure out how in the world am I going to organize all of this information, that's 20 plus years old, alongside the new things that I was reading in terms of character development and what I wanted the book to look like and so forth. And I just went down one of those 2 a.m. rabbit holes and discovered Scott's videos on Zettelkasten. Even though all of his context was for writing academic or deep thinking nonfiction, I immediately saw the application to fiction and I knew that this would work for me. So I didn't even have a note box. I took the lid off of a note box and started in a lid and started putting my cards in and figuring out what this could look like and how it could work for me. And it was at that time that we taken at least one, often 2 or 3 annual hunting trips. And I thought, I'm just going to go out to the backcountry at that point in Wyoming and sit in a tent and I'm just going to write this thing. I'm just going to do this thing. And that's what blew it open for me. So the key piece of that is how my Zettelkasten got named, because on that trip, I don't know if you can see this. This, my friends, is Wilma. Wilma is a pack mule. So we rode 3.5 hours on horseback out into the Idaho backcountry to get to the camp. We crossed 3 rivers and scaled cliffs. It was absolutely terrifying. Grateful to arrive alive, I was. But the horse I rode out was awful. Very jumpy, very skittish, and not being a lifelong horsewoman, I was just hoping to survive the whole thing. Well, the ride back, they gave me Wilma, the mule. Mules are so sure-footed and so confident and calm. We immediately got into a groove, and Wilma brought me, without terror, fear, or peeing my pants, out of the Idaho backcountry and back to civilization in one piece. And I was so grateful, and it was such a great experience that the next time we went, I requested her. I said, if I can't ride Wilma out and back, I'm not going. So I got my mule. Well, when I got back and started processing all these note cards and things that I had done while I was out there, it just seemed to me that this beautiful, amazing, smart, resourceful animal who had literally carried me into and out of the backcountry could only be suiting for naming my Zettelkasten. So mine will forever be known as Wilma because she's my lifeline.
Wow. Nice.
Deb, what we're doing is introducing ourselves and our Zettelkastens, and if it has a name, saying what the story is behind the name and does it have a personality, all that. So would you like to jump in on that?
Did you see my eyebrow lift? Yeah, because I had a name, and Sheila, from a story that Kathleen published or wrote about. I'm not sure. I don't remember quite now, but there was a story about a woman who the programmer who was put in the fix, and she had to make a decision as to what she was going to do, and what she did solved the problem, and it solved it with a plum, right? And so I thought, sounds like a fit to me. You know, sounds like a fit to me. So that was the name, and then I changed it, and then I thought, wait a minute, what did I change it to? So it's back to Sheila, because Sheila is the one that's stuck in my mind, you know. She's Sheila. I mean, it's like there is no solution that if you can't remember it, then it's not a solution. You know what I'm saying? It's like, forget about it. So, and she's still being built. Her personality is still coming out. It's still, we're still feeling each other out. And so that's where I am. I don't have any. Wilma was my mom's name, just by the way, you know.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. But I don't have any other stories, you know, to share with you at this point. Only to say that my Sheila is growing. Okay, that's it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, well, and now it's my turn. So I'm Mel Jeffcoat, and well, let's just get right into it. This is my Zettelkasten, as far as I've gotten in a couple of years. And actually, for about the first year or so, it didn't have a name. I couldn't think of one that really fit. But then I was doing a lot of research on medieval and Renaissance memory systems, and I was reading about Giordano Bruno, who was, you know, insanely creative and intelligent and made connections among all sorts of different things. And so I'm like, all right, that would be a great name. But then I started to have a pause on that, because he was burned at the stake. And that seems like a really bad precedent to set for a paper-based object. So instead of naming it Bruno, I chose to name it Clavis Universalis, which means the universal key, and was also the name of one of Bruno's works, if I'm remembering correctly, the one that might not have ever existed. At any rate, no copy of it exists now, and we don't know what's in it. But supposedly it had the key to everything, all the rest of his work. So that's it, Clavis for short. And I got into doing the Zettelkasten because I actually still have quite a lot of all of my writing through my entire life, you know, from like age 5 up. But it's all scattered, it's not organized. And I know that there's things that I've forgotten, you know, insights that I've had. And so when I discovered this Zettelkasten concept, I'm like, this is the one that I can use to collect all of this. And that brings us into our activity for this meeting, this video, which was to take one of our old pieces of work, a journal or a notebook or something along those lines, and go through it and extract what is still valuable, what we want to keep in our Zettelkasten into it. And then we'll talk about how that went and what we found and what we discovered in the process. So is there anybody who would like to go first? I'm just going to start pointing at people if nobody volunteers.
Okay, I'll go first.
Thank you.
This is creepily, really creepily pertinent because I didn't know what the assignment was, but I just did this on my own, you know, because I've been gone for a week, and I gave myself one day because I was very limited on time to work on my novel. And so I thought, well, way back, I started with my happy planner. And my daughter gave this to me. It was her college, basically, planner notebook. So, you know, 5 or more years ago. And I saw it and I thought, it's just so cool. I love it. And so I went through and I printed out all of the character development and world building worksheets that I could find. And I filled them all out diligently because I was essentially trying to resurrect this novel from so long ago. And I just didn't know how to do it. I had no way into the world. So I thought, well, I'm just going to start with the characters. I'm going to fill all that stuff out. So I will spare you the huge pile of journals that's sitting over there. But essentially, that's what I did, is I just started with a huge pile of all of the stuff that I had that had some bearing either on the characters or the story. And that included a digital file, which I know wasn't part of the homework, but I had to go there. Because the novella, which takes place before the novel, was all basically typed in old Word documents. And of course, that was like Word 20 years ago. I don't even know if it was called Word then. But when I saved it, it was all printed out in gobbledygook, like it was crazy. So I had to convert it so that I could get it into a form that I could print it out. And then I was able to harvest those story bits out of those documents. So all of those processes found their way into the note cards, which I bought for when I travel, because I do these retreats a few times a year. I bought a mobile Zettelkasten. So I take out everything that I'm going to need or use, and it goes in here, which zips shut and locks. So it's pretty indestructible to take it on the road. So I just built from those resources the cards that I needed to continue working on the project. So in that way, I focused on character development and any kind of the quirky things, either that I had observed and scrawled in a journal. You know, like looking out the window, I may have observed something that the cattle were doing and thought to myself, oh, my main male character is a rancher, that might be relevant. You know, but this stuff was years and years ago. So I just went through and literally started pulling things out of those little observations and sketchbooks and journals and papers and all the rest of it, and packing those things either into character or into story cards. So then they got properly filed and sorted and indexed. So now I can go right to it, where before, you know, I literally might spend days. I actually have this in a video. I spent like 2 days flipping through a journal, trying to figure out what the last name of a particular character was. And this is so funny. This is the last thing I'll say. This is the testament to the Zettelkasten. 2 days sitting right over there on the floor, flipping through journal after journal, trying to figure out, I know I gave her a last name. I come over here to my desk and I sit down, and I thought, well, I'm just going to look at all of her entries in my index and see if maybe something sparks, you know. 2 days. I open my index, I go to Kennedy, and there's her last name in my index. It works. It works every time if you just do the process. So yeah, I can honestly say, and I sound like a crazy evangelist, I could not have written my novel. No way could I have finished it without my note box and the system. And I certainly could not have finished 4 out of the 5 parts of the Zettelkasten for Fiction book that I'm currently writing. I could not have done it without the system. I just couldn't, because I can't hold it all in my head. Certainly not now. 20 years ago, maybe, but certainly not now. So it is the way for me.
Yes. Yes.
Go Wilma.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Mm. Mm.
All right. Picking randomly. Julianne.
Okie dokie. So first of all, I want to thank Kathleen for her video where she showed what she does with old journals. because after that video, probably even that very day, I pulled out my old journals with no thought at all. All I did, I was sitting with my husband, we had the game on or whatever it was. I numbered the pages and I put A, B, C, D along all of the chunks.
Yeah.
Without thought of what is it, that was there. I did that through three journals like a month ago. And then Mel gave us this assignment and I pulled out the oldest of the journals. So I'll share what it is that I pulled that has got me fired up. So these are the bib cards that I created from this journal. And there's a lot in here that I could choose from. And there are a lot of common threads. And I took note of, well, what would all the index entries be from these when I make my cards from them? And I came up with probably 40. And then I prioritized which of those are kind of foundational, fundamental things. And I arrived at several of those. But the one that I thought, this kind of began it all in this journal is this one here that's on page 10. And I'll just read this to you. You might not be able to read it. It says, musical transition analysis of types and mechanism for signaling, leaving, and arrival. So this came about because I had begun music composition lessons with my teacher, and she diagnosed that I probably had a blind spot with transitions between one idea and another in music. And so part of my lesson plan was, we'll go find some transitions and understand how they work. So what I had done and what I had documented in this page 10, I had compiled a list of musical transition types, and I related them and I named them, and you can see some of them over on the right-hand side here. I related them to ways that in the physical world, you're moving from one place to another. And what is it that signals, hey, you're leaving, you're in between, you're there. And then how is that accomplished musically? So this, you see that I've got a lot of index entries that I made on this one. So I ended up indexing transition, patterns, signaling, exiting, in-betweenness, arrival, a journey of feelings, time, space, and the timeless way. So that builder guy, Kathleen, the timeless way of building, I'm viewing these different kinds of transitions that can be identified in lots of different pieces. It ends up being kind of a template that takes many different directions when a composer pours their creativity into it. And so this was just sitting there and I hadn't done anything with it. And now it's calling to me, especially it's calling to me when I found its parent card. So this is a quote that I have to the timeless way. We must begin by understanding that every place is given its character by certain patterns of events that keep on happening there. This is just one of many beautiful phrases in this book. This book is more than just about building. It's really about life. I just love it. So I've got the parent card, and the one I chose, and a very good qualifying step parent, or maybe a godparent. So the parent card is this one on the left: Experiential Music Theory, a self-directed curriculum and practice that will bring my fluency of musical expression to a similar level that I already have when speaking and writing English. And so this was kind of an idea that I had at the beginning of this year. I put it in my Zettelkasten and it just sat there. I had added a few more ideas to it of things that I might do in exploring this. And now number 3 is this transition patterns thing. And I think that the transition patterns thing is a great place for me to begin, because I can see how a lot of different offshoots are going to come from that. It's going to help me do what Scott Shepard so beautifully says. It's, you're learning to contribute. And that's what I'm hoping to do here. So the alternate parent card has to do with time. And the very disquieting realization that science and spiritualism both share in common, which is that, that thing you think of as time, it doesn't really exist, which is pretty disquieting for somebody who writes music. It's like, well, okay, I believe you, but how does music work then? And it's a big puzzle. It's a big puzzle, but I'm not going to argue with it. It's just, I'm just going with it. So this was another alternate parent, and I've got them linking with each other. And I think that these two strands, the whole notion of time and then music, are going to come together in this way. But the tagline of this card is time is a convention calibrating one periodicity against another. And that's what I've got. I'm very excited. You're going to be hearing about syntopical score reading, I can tell you.
All right, well, I'll go next because I have a feeling that Kathleen is going to give us some amazing insights, and so I want her to go last. So I've been working through like my practice journals from when I first started studying Druidry about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago now, and developing practices. And so I've already gone through the very first journal of that and got that mostly into my Zettelkasten. So I'm like, all right, I'll get into the second one, which is this very cool journal that I got from the Art Institute of Chicago in 1999 or maybe 2000. I don't remember which side of the new year it was on. So I've been going through this thing, and actually there's very little that I wanted to put in the Zettelkasten. A lot of it was dreams. I was doing a lot of dream work in the time period, which is mostly 2013 to the beginning of 2017 is what this covers. So that's all. I do have a dream section in my Zettelkasten, so I am going to copy those over in there because I have this idea that if I can collect them all from various places that I put them, that I might see some patterns and trends and find something interesting there. But that's not really all that relevant. Nobody wants to hear other people's dreams. It's boring to anybody who's not part of that. But finally, at the very, very end, I did find a few things that would work. So I've got cards everywhere. Let me find find the one that I want. Okay. So I was given this book at some point, A Power Set Apart, which is basically, as I understand it, sort of a 1970s California reimagining of a poem, a Roman poem called On the Nature of Things by Lucretius. But I don't really trust this because on the background, on the back, it says, in a very real sense, Lucretius was a Taoist praising the beauty and encompassing power of nature. I'm like, he was not a Taoist. He may have had some similar ideas, but he was not a Taoist. But anyway, I was given that book, and this was long before I had even heard of Mortimer Adler and the concept of, doing an inspectional reading before you decide you're going to commit to something. So I jumped straight in to just meditate on this book. And that's something that I talk about a lot, is discursive meditation to really understand things. So I didn't even look at this book before I jumped in. That was a bad idea. But I got through a few pages of it meditating, and I went, I I don't like any of this. And I read through the rest of it. I'm like, oh, this is not worth it. But um, in one of those very first pages, the quote was, "The senses do not fail us as easily as reason." And I had meditated on that line. Um, and so I said, if reality is a massive swirling chaos that no one being can perceive wholly, then our senses are a subset of that whole. Reason is the attempt to make a consistent story out of that subset, which always must exclude some experiences. And even worse, most people do not construct their own stories based on their own experiences, but accept the stories others give and ignore anything that doesn't confirm it. The senses, being at least one step less removed from reality, can warn us about holes and blind spots in our reason if we have the wit to pay attention to them. So when I found that little snippet in the journal, I'm like, okay, this is relevant to a lot of what I'm writing about right now. So I went into my journal or into my index, and quite frankly, I had difficulty finding anything because my index is not as good as it could be. And the things that it would have connected to were before I started doing like taglines like Kathleen teaches. But I remembered that I had some cards on propaganda, and I thought that that would go well with the people taking on stories from other people. And so I found, pull this out here, um, this quote that I had put in from Schumacher, which I think I've mentioned him before, from his book, A Guide for the Perplexed. And he wrote, "Without self-awareness, man acts, speaks, studies, reacts mechanically, like a machine, on the basis of programs acquired accidentally, unintentionally, and mechanically. He is not aware that he is acting in accordance with programs. It is therefore not difficult to reprogram him, to make him think and do quite different things from those he had thought and done before, provided only the new program does not wake him up. When he is awake, no one can program him. He programs himself." So I thought that was a really fitting parent for those cards, that card that I found. And then I just did a quick little like bridge. So it takes a self-awareness to recognize stories as a layer of abstraction beyond sensations. Stories are easier to manipulate than experiences. So yeah, I was glad to find that little nugget in the journal. I went through the whole thing. There's only a few other things that I would put in, but it was worthwhile to find all of those dreams. So that was my experience.
Cool.
Okay, I guess that means it's my turn, and I have some cards to share. Mine is thanks to Julianne. Last week, she pulled out a card as part of her presentation that she said, "A lot of you probably have this very card in your Zettelkasten because it was part of Scott Shepherd's book. When he was telling you how to get started with your Zettelkasten, he had you make out this same card." And sure enough, I had it in my Zettelkasten, so I went to my Zettelkasten to pull it out, and it didn't pop right out. I didn't find it in my index, and I ended up getting sidetracked and not working with it right away. But when it came time to do this assignment from Mel, it occurred to me that would be a very good time to dive deeper into the earliest cards in my Zettelkasten and figure out why that card wasn't immediately accessible to me. What was going on in those early days? Because I certainly remember the card, and it was a key card for me. So I pulled out some of my earliest cards from my Zettelkasten, and I discovered that I had a big flaw that was going on in those early days. Many of you who follow my podcast know that I'm recently in the process of converting from dead title cards to real main cards to replace them. So originally my group 3 was going to be on linguistics. And so I just had a dead title card, linguistics, and it was time to make a real card. Well, what was I going to make? I mean, so much grew up inside my 3 that there's only a little bit of linguistics in it. And so I kind of deferred that one for the moment. But what I discovered was that I had a nesting of title cards, all of them fairly dead. And what was worse is I hadn't indexed the cards behind, in those groups because I had the presumption, well, the title card will get me there. I'll be able to get to any card in that group from its title card. So no need to index. Well, the problem is when you're trying to bring new cards into the system, those title cards don't match with anything. So they just get left. And that meant whole chunks of my Zettelkasten were not being given the opportunity to blend with new stuff. And that was a real flaw. So it was, I'm glad that period didn't last very long in my Zettelkasten. Mostly it was around February of 1922 through
2022.
I'll go again. That was born
Wow, that sucker must be huge.
It goes back from
It's like Victoria's novels coming to life here.
from February of 2022 up to the few months after in that period of time. So, but some of my treasures from my earliest days had been inaccessible. And so I want to share a few of those cards and what my Zettelkasten used to look like. And then if any of you have heard me pronounce again and again and again, do not renumber your cards. It's a ridiculous waste of time. There's no productive value in it, and you just absolutely should not do it. And so I'm going to show you the proof of that right here, because I'm going to change my camera to my down-facing camera. Okay. How do I know that you ought not renumber your cards? Because if you hold this one up to the light, you'll find that there's other numbers under there. I did it once. And it's an absolute waste of time. All right. So what I wanted to share with you in my Zettelkasten are some of my earliest cards. And here is one of the very, very first cards, and it's the card that I made in response to the Lumen card. So when I started saying, okay, I'm going to dive in and figure out what happened to Nicholas Lumen's card, and I decided, okay, I'm going to figure out what happened to Nicholas Lumen's card, I was, with, mind you, no index entries here, able to turn up this card. And what's interesting about this card is that it does not reference any other actual cards in my system. It references bib card names. And I didn't have the concept yet of referencing card numbers. And in particular, this one, Lumen, others, and this reference right here is to the bib card that I made that went with Lumen's card. And from that, I was able to pull the actual bib card, and the bib card did have the card number reference on it. So I was able to turn up the card. And mind you, this was like the third card that I added to my Zettelkasten. And I assure you that there's no way that the third card in a Zettelkasten could have a number like 3B2A-2A2 if that had been its native number. Further proof that some serious quantities, like caseloads of these things, had been applied. Don't do it. And then you have to redo your whole index. It's an absolute waste of time. Okay, so what the biggest revelation for me was that fact that whole bunches of cards were never indexed properly and never got to expand. But the one I wanted to share with you that's a whole lot of fun, and part of the reason why I love a Zettelkasten, is this cute one. Remember, my first area of interest was language. And this came from a Facebook post that my niece made, and where her son asked her from across the room, "Mom, is A takeaway a good grade?" And she said, "What? Is A takeaway a good grade?" So she had to come over and take a look over his shoulder. A minus. See, there's his little thumb pointing to it. And so why this was fascinating to me in my study of linguistics was, how amazing is it that you have to be that specific in how you use the language in order to communicate. There is one and only one way to say that grade, and that's A minus. If you try any other mechanism of saying it, you will not communicate. And that tied, of course, to surprise, and I even have it here, which ties to Luhmann's card, and also the idea that surprise can be a friend or a foe. If you have too much surprise, no communication takes place. You have to have the perfect balance of things that you already know plus surprise to get real communication. And that's what a Zettelkasten can give you. So that's why this is my story.
Awesome, Kathleen.
So Kathleen, will you have a whole indexing task backlog from your recovered clumps?
Yes, I must if I want them to join with anything. And they're wonderful cards because they're so original to my system. And they go back to when I thought that I was going to have this peaceful pastoral life. Finally, after 8 years of study, I was convinced that if I only put a solid 9th year into it, I might actually be able to speak Spanish. Hasn't happened yet. I've gotten to the point where I can read it pretty fluently. And I can understand expository Spanish. If I turn into like a YouTube channel, I can understand it completely. Somebody explaining concepts in Spanish. Man, I cannot make out what's being said in the grocery store. I can pick out random words. So my life turned around because of Zeke. He had a different idea in mind for me of what he wanted me to do. And one of the first things that he wanted me to do was to explain the Zettelkastens system in a way that took the mystery out of it. Part of the reason why I had gone through all the labor, and I will now confess, not once, but twice went through the labor of renumbering all my cards. I was doing it because I was struggling to have a system that would be easy to understand and easy to work with. And after tying myself in knots on several occasions, if I finally was able to devise the effortless numbering system, which is what I advocate. And then being a mathematician by training, I was able to demonstrate to myself that it is not only functionally equivalent to Luhmann system, it is mathematically equivalent to Luhmann system. You lose absolutely no information, no value by abandoning horrific numbering systems to use a numbering system that's absolutely effortless.
Here, here.
That's
Well,
it.
I think, I don't know, did you invent the tagline in the index thing?
I did. I may
That-
have reinvented it. I
That
haven't
is a work of art.
dollar, so I don't know if others have invented it ahead of me, but I at least independently invented it.
I think that is what's making it work. You and I chatted on LiLLiPub about the kind of the origin stories of our Zettelkastens. And when Nadia Z burst forth as someone I was communicating with, it was literally the long weekend in which I started indexing the way that you suggest. Everything was gathering dust over there.
Yeah, my system has whole index cards where the first letter of the alphabet is all just dead titles, and half of the next one dead titles, and they do nothing for you.
Well, that kind of leads into our overflow topic, where if we had a little bit of extra time. So just real quick, we can go around, and the topic is categories. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you use them? So let's just go through, and I'll start. I'll start this time. I started with no categories before I discovered, Scott Shepherd's system, and wasn't working for me. I went to his, academic disciplines. That was really useful to start with, But now I'm back to categorizing as I go and trying to just connect things associatively as much as possible. So it was a useful sort of transitional system for me, but in the end, it's not what I wanted to keep doing.
Well, with categories, I did what I often do, which is over-engineer. I took what Scott said. He pointed to the academic of disciplines on Wikipedia, and he was only using the top numbers and saying, yeah, just make everything up from then. That was really excellent advice, which I did not take. I went and I created a number for myself from every danged one of them. And so I've got a lot of dead categories that I didn't fill my box with categories I wasn't using yet, thank goodness. But those categories served only to give me long numbers to write. They really didn't help me. And so now I am finding it much more pleasant to allow the cross categorization to just happen. So I've got time and music theory as a couple of threads that are connecting. And what category does that belong in? It belongs in Julianne. That's what it is.
I'll jump in next because I'm hybrid. I have categories and I have systems that do not use categories. They just start with the effortless numbering, and I love them both, but I love them for very different reasons. For my fiction writing, I love my categories. They help me so much because they let me divide up my characters. My characters have their own categories. Scenes can have a category. Research can have a category. And what categories do for you, and I like to do them in pairs where I use 2 cards with the same number, because that lets me drop things inside that category without having to give that individual card a number, what I just said I hated doing. But for fiction writing, it makes you can capture an idea fast, and it doesn't have to blend with everything else. It has to blend with a story, and you'll be back to that section and blend it in as you go. So for fiction writing, I love my categories and I'm going to stick with them. And the ones that I've never used that are dead categories for me are all the general knowledge categories and all of the ones that I set up at the start, that were going to be this philosophy and all of this stuff. Never got used. But for fiction writing, I love it. I definitely love my categories, especially since Victoria's given me so many new category cards.
Well, those become templates.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They're patterns. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whole different thing.
So, since my box functions primarily for fiction, I did start with Scott's system. So I just had 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. That was what I started with. And then underneath that, based on different things I was researching for the novel, it was very easy for me to just slot those things in wherever they lived under those numbers, with the exception, obviously, of 6,000. That's my catch-all. So lots of different things just get slotted in there, whether it's quotes or collections of names or collections of dialogue or whatever. And then 7,000s is just all the novel world, anything that has to do with book 1. So I love them. I mean, it is so helpful to be able to pull some dialogue or pull settings and just flip through them. I love me a pool. I'm with Kathleen. I like a collection or a pool. So if I'm drafting something and I know I need a piece of dialogue or I need some details for a particular setting, I just grab those cards and flip through them and, oh yeah, this describes a cafe. This is how I want to do it. And I can just go right to it. So for me, I definitely love them. I don't get too in the weeds with them. I like having the overarching structure of Scott's categories that allow me to drop things into the logical place where I think they go. I think I needed those guardrails to get things started. And then once things were going, then you just kind of follow the breadcrumb trail back to where you think they live. And that's what governs how I do it. Is I very much stick to the logic of my own imagination and let that guide me, because that's 2 years from now, that's how I'm going to think of something is, you know, if I'm thinking of a particular character, anything that has to do with them, I know is going to be under their character, so that I know that's how I'm going to think of it. I can always find my way back. So I just try to be very true to how I associate things, and then I can always find them.
Okay, so I guess that's me, right? Okay, so I'm not well, the what was that first analogy or that first demo illustration story that you made, Kathleen? Was it the jellyfish, the little boy who asked the question?
Yeah, of his mom.
Right. So I looked at that and I thought, oh, okay, then whatever it is I'm thinking about, that'll be my number one, you know, that'll be my number one. And then if I change it and whatever I'm thinking about the next thing is not related to number one, and I don't use the effortless numbering system to expand on under that, then it would be my number two something. And I would go along that way. And that's what I've been doing. But now I'm a little bit confused as to what I'm supposed. My indexing has gotten all wonky as a result as well. So I'm just I can't tell you, Kathleen, I'll be so happy when your book comes out. I just would be so pleased, because I've gotten myself off into some deep waters and I don't exactly understand, you know, what it is, how I escape and get back to dry land, you know. So
well, you and I can workshop that. I do workshop with different people from time to time over their card numbering, and Deb, absolutely for you.
oh well, thank you. Okay. Let's do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Yeah.
Very good. Well,
This was awesome.
that brings us to the end of our hour here.
Yeah.
It's been a great conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Who's next?
I'll
Yeah,
do the
who
next
is
one.
next?
Yay!
All
I'll take a turn. Now that I'm back in the saddle.
Yay! All right.
Okay, I might need a little help refreshing me where I go to find where I choose my assignments, but I think I can probably pull it up.
Yeah, let us know if you'll find it over in
Yeah.
LiLLigans, and if you don't, happy to send you the link. Look forward to.
Yeah,
you're our teacher. You're going to give us an assignment. You like homework.
I'll get something chosen and posted up no later than tomorrow. I'll go find it and get that posted up.
And anyone who wants to get in on the fun, we hang out over in LiLLipub. See you there.